Hello and welcome to All About Boston. I'm Seth McCoy. Tonight we are continuing our series of at-large candidates who, of course, if you're paying attention to Boston politics, you know that we have a field that is so big that we have moved this show to an hour. This is also the start of an hour-long program for All About Boston that will run for the rest of time. So that's exciting. Tonight my first guest is Philip Frattaroli, who is, like I mentioned, an at-large city council candidate. I want to welcome you to the show. And I want to remind viewers, if they're at home, they can call us here with a question, 617-708-3290. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Seth. This is a great forum, and I'm so happy that you're doing this because sometimes we feel like we're kind of doing it in the dark, but there are a lot of candidates and we all have kind of interesting stories, so thank you.
Well, and I think that too, you know, if all the candidates are going to forums, there's almost too many of you for people to hear about what you're all about and why you're running and why they should vote for you. So why are you running? You're from the North End, but...
I'm from the North End. I'm a small business owner. I own a restaurant in the North End. When I opened my restaurant, it's called Ducali. It's a pizzeria on Causeway Street right by the garden. And when I opened, I had to deal with about 15 different departments at the city. And I had just graduated from law school and you know, was kind of versed in the law and the processes and all that. And it was hard. It was a really hard process to go through. And I want to make it easier. I want to be a voice for small business people on the city council and try to help people who have an idea, who want to create jobs in the city, who want to create revenue for the city, do that and pursue their dreams. And I grew up in a restaurant family. My dad was born in Italy. He came here when he was 16, and he opened a restaurant when he was 23. And those kind of opportunities don't really exist anymore because it's so hard to either get financing or find a landlord that will let you do it, or get a liquor license, which is another, you know, kind of nightmare process in the city. So that's kind of why I want to do this. I have a good job. I get to go to work right now at like 11 o'clock in the morning, which is like, I think a lot of people's dream, but for me, this is about public service. It's about, you know, trying to give back of my experience in doing this, opening a restaurant and opening a small business in the city, and trying to make it easier for people and grow the city, make it stronger, make our neighborhood stronger.
And you just opened the restaurant 4 months ago?
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
4 years ago, yeah. We opened
but you got married 3 months ago.
Got married three months ago.
Yeah, we were talking off camera, and so you opened the restaurant 4 years ago, took the bar like 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I was hoping to open the restaurant in about April of 2009, and the process with the liquor license got so delayed that I had to open 2 weeks before I took the bar exam in Massachusetts. So that was a hectic kind of 2 weeks, and thankfully, being in a restaurant family, my mom and dad and my sisters were a big help to me to get it done, or else I would have never been able to do either of them. So,
but before that time, you had never thought about running for office?
I'd always been involved in politics and kind of like interested in politics, but it really wasn't until I'm now 31. I just turned 31, and for the first time in my life, I really feel like I have a perspective on the issues that we face. I just got married, like you said, and kind of going through and studying for this campaign, seeing like the processes for kids, for school placement, for all that stuff. It's you know, this is like kind of when we're facing it, my wife and I, and we want to buy a piece of property and stay in the city and raise our family here. And it's just, I do feel like I have a perspective as a young person, as somebody who's never worked in city government. There are great people in city government, but I have a perspective from outside, and I think that's a valuable thing. And there's 4 votes that Bostonians can cast, and I hope to get one of them in the at-large race. And
you mentioned that, you know, you're newly married, so obviously school's something you're going to have to be thinking about, because I presume you're going to start a family at one point.
I hope so.
So, in terms of how the school system is set up now, you know, there's a lot of talk about charter schools versus the public school. Where do you sit on that discussion?
Vis-a-vis charter schools? I believe in ideas. I believe in kind of like innovation, and I think there's a role for charter schools to come up with ideas that might improve all of public education. So, and part of this process is, I know a lot about restaurants. I know a lot about the liquor license process. I know about, you know, the things that I know about, and getting out to the different parts of the city and talking to people in different neighborhoods, I'm learning more about the issues that are important to people, and I haven't figured it all out. I don't know everything. And part of the thing I like about, kind of running and putting myself out there is you talk to people and you learn a lot about what people are facing. So in terms of in terms of charter schools, I think we need ideas. I think we need smart people to, throw things against the wall and see if they stick. And we have a great innovation school in the North End, the Elliott School, which is kind of, we hear like rave reviews about what goes on there. And I think, if we can have people innovate new ways to succeed in public education, I think that there's a lot to be learned there.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to look at the schools that are succeeding in the city, whether they're charter or even private, and certainly public, and figure out what is working in those schools and then duplicate that in other areas. Because, I was talking with some friends about busing, and I said, well, to me, busing is just really a Band-Aid on the issue, because the problem is the schools. If you fix the schools, then, and a friend of mine said, well, we're going to lose diversity if you take away busing, because then kids are going to go to the neighborhood schools, which I agree with to a certain extent, but I also see that the neighborhoods are changing, so that there is a little more diversity in a lot of the neighborhoods. So, in terms of spending all that money on busing, would you work to go back to neighborhood schools, or do you think busing should still be happening?
I think there's a lot to be said about a child getting to go to a school that's near their house and the kind of the sense of community that comes from that. At the same time, if there's not a good school in your neighborhood, then you should be able to go to a good school, no matter what. And so, I mean, there's no one solution to everything, and different neighborhoods have different issues, but I think the more ideas, the more people come together and kind of try to work on what the problems are, I think we'll find something that's going to work for all of Boston.
Absolutely. Now, your wife, Kelly, does she know that for the next, 4 months or so, she's hardly going to see you?
Well, she married a restaurateur, so she's used to kind of crazy hours, and her dad almost opened a restaurant of his own. Yeah. So I think she's kind of used to the crazy lifestyle that I have now and am going to have the next 4 months. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected, then it's only going to get worse.
Right, exactly. We were talking also about liquor licenses.
Yep.
Councilor Presley put something on the council yesterday, just basically to say that there should be no limit on liquor licenses in the city. What is your take on that?
So right now there's a limit on licenses based on population, and her argument is that was kind of created in a system where there was a strife, like a social strife between the old Yankees and the Irish, 75, 80 years ago. I think that it's good to kind of have liquor license tied to population. There's some good parts of it, I've only read media accounts of her proposal, so I haven't read all of it, but I think that there shouldn't just be no cap on licenses. I think that we need that, and I think it should be based on population. If you look in the North End, there's like a liquor license for every 100 people, which is, I mean, there are no bars really in the North End, and they're all restaurants, but that's not going to be the case for every place in every neighborhood. So I think there has to be a limit on it. She does have some restrictions on the licenses you get from the city, whether or not you can sell those for a profit. And I agree with that. I don't think that if you get a license for a couple $1,000s, you should be able to sell it for a big profit.
Yeah, because I mean, really, what's to prevent somebody from just saying, "Oh, I'm going to open this restaurant, get the approvals, get the license," and then as soon as they get the license, say, "I have a license for sale." So it's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, no, and I think she has some good parts. A lot of it too is she wants to try to create incentive for people to open licenses or open restaurants in kind of downtrodden part of the city, and I think that's great. Like if you look at my family story, my father opened a restaurant in the North End in 1977, and in 1977 everybody thinks of the North End as like this awesome place, and it is. But in 1977 there were bars on his windows, and he had to ask a don for permission to open in the North End. So it wasn't the neighborhood it is now, and it's partly because of great civic engagement, but it's also part of the restaurant industry. Helped turn around that neighborhood, helped turn around the South End. I really believe in the power of small business people to make communities better, because they're not only are they on the streets every day with like eyes on the streets. I think they're, they're creating jobs, they're creating revenue, they're sweeping the streets. They're,
Right.
they, I think as a small business community, I think
Well, it's sort of how we
They're
all
great.
have to get back to, not just the small businesses,
Yeah.
but homeowners and renters.
Yeah.
It's, you have to pay attention to your neighborhood and,
Yeah.
be involved in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
As the old saying goes, it takes a village. And,
does.
I get crazy when I see litter on the street
Yeah.
or kids throwing litter out of
Yeah.
school buses, for example, or
Mhm.
even just walking down the street, or even adults.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
No, you
very
have to take pride in
frustrating.
where you come from, and,
Right.
and that sometimes that means, bending down and pick something up.
Exactly.
And restaurant owners are good at that because we need the front of our places to look nice, or else nobody's going to want to come in.
Exactly. I want to point out for viewers at home, in case they don't know,
Mhm.
that the liquor licenses are actually controlled by the state. The city
Yep.
doesn't control any of the licenses that per se. I mean, there's a licensing board, and it's where they come from is
Yeah, they
From the
come.
state.
Yeah, they come from the state, but the city does have
Right.
some juice in that. And
Right.
and this process is now like if you want to get one of those licenses that the city controls, there's really no transparency at all to it. Like you get on a list and you don't know who else is on the list. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes qualified people are on the list for a long, long time. They don't know where they stand. So, I part of the reason I want to run is because I want to bring some transparency to that. And we have a new opportunity here. We've had a great mayor for the last 20 years, and everybody's rightfully praising him for what he's done in the last 20 years, and it really has turned the city into a world-class city. But we do have an opportunity now to kind of go in the path that will lead us for the next 20 years. And I think, more transparency, more fairness in the way some things are done in the city, I think is a great thing.
You've been pretty active in the North End. So tell me a little bit about your civic engagement over there.
Well, I'm a business owner. My family started, my Uncle Donato started the Taste of the North End about 20 years ago. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary, which is a group that kind of brings all the restaurants together for one night, and we raise money for the local charities, not only North End charities, but citywide charities. And now I'm the executive director of that, which is kind of a blessing and a curse because it's not an easy job at all to try to corral 35, 40 restaurant owners into one night. But I'm also on the North End Waterfront Neighborhood Council, which is
Very active group.
a very active group, very opinionated group, and I'm very proud to. I just became the vice president of that. I'm also part of a group called Boston Youth Wrestling, just something I really believe in. I wrestled in high school and at Boston College, and I really believe in the sport of wrestling. I think it creates a lot of character in young men and women. And currently, when I was growing up, there was only one wrestling program in the city, in Boston Public Schools. It was at Boston Latin. And recently, in the last few years, some teachers got together. They put a program in the Josiah Quincy School, and now the person who started this Boston Youth Wrestling started a program in Dorchester High. So we're trying to, a basketball team in the city, if you make the basketball team, that's only 12 kids, but a wrestling program is 60 kids that get to do something in the winter.
Wow.
And they get to, they learn how to be on a team, but they pursue their individual goals, which is what life is.
Right, and sports involvement and
Yeah.
also involvement with the arts and education they're pretty essential, I think.
So.
in
I
terms
think
of-
you want to educate the whole person, and sports and music and arts and everything is really a part of that. And not to mention, like, if there's a really talented kid who's a wrestler, he might have a chance to go to college for free.
Right.
And that's a great opportunity I think that we need to give to kids.
One of the things the city council focuses on is the budget that
Yep.
the mayor presents.
Yeah.
So you're obviously a businessman, so you know a little bit about doing a budget, having a budget,
Yep.
keeping a budget.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, you're probably pretty comfortable in terms of sitting in hearings and hearing about what the different city departments are spending their money on, and how that whole process works.
I definitely would add that to the city council. As a small business person, I have to live within a budget. Just as an FYI to the next mayor, I'm not going to be a definite yes for all your budgets. We're going to have to, make sure that we're doing the things we should be doing. And but yeah, I mean, that kind of discipline, that kind of staying within our means is important to me. And now, if you look at the city, when Boston College is expanding and Harvard's expanding, and less land that was producing revenue for the city is now producing revenue, and the same thing with the hospitals. I mean, we have to really look at those things. We can't just pass it off onto the property owners.
And I also think, I mean, there are some colleges and universities who are buying up property, and they're not necessarily turning them into dormitories, but they're just renting them out, renting. But they're still taking those properties off the tax rolls, which to me seems ludicrous.
Exactly. So
I mean,
there's a lot of things that, you know, as somebody coming from the outside, I think, you know, I don't have a stake in that, and I really would want to call attention to it, and that's part of the reason. I'm a first-time candidate. I'm from a part of the city that doesn't have a lot of votes, so I don't have that much to lose. I have a job to go back to.
Crisscrossing the entire city
and
every
it's
day.
a very diverse city, and there's all, like, the neighborhoods are very different. The way the city was designed is, it's interesting, and it's educational. I mean, I love Boston, and my family's history is tied to Boston. We achieved the American dream in my family because of Boston and because of the opportunities we had here. And I love the city to begin with, and now just this last, you know, month and a half has really cemented the fact that this is the place I want to spend the rest of my life.
What's your favorite neighborhood aside from the North End?
I really love Charlestown. I really love East Boston. But recently I was in West Roxbury, and like the space that they have there is something I think.
I used to live in West Roxbury.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to avoid bringing my wife there, because then she's going to want to move out of the North End. But
yeah, you guys need to stay in the North End a little bit longer.
yeah, it's such a great neighborhood, and I really, it's nice to be like around my parents and around my aunts and uncles and cousins. And
are they all still in the North End, or
most of them are, especially like my younger cousins now are moving back into the neighborhood. And my parents, I had a tragedy in my family. My younger brother died in a car accident, and now my parents kind of moved back into the city and want to spend more time with us in the city. So it's kind of cool. That's one of the reasons I opened the restaurant, was because rather than being a lawyer in a firm, I could be around my family, have lunch with my dad, who drives me crazy. But
all parents drive us crazy, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's what they're there for.
I think so.
So you just brought up something interesting, in that you had gone to school to be a lawyer.
Yep.
And then at what point did you decide, oh, I'm going to do this restaurant instead?
It was kind of the worst month of my life. It was October 2008. My brother was killed in a car accident. He was 16, and then like a couple days later was when all the banks started to fail, and like kind of Lehman Brothers and all that stuff happened. So my dad, who owns the building that my restaurant's in, had a tenant, and the guy kind of like flipped out because all his investors kind of got scared. So he just walked away from the lease.
Wow.
And so we had the space available. And for month after month, nobody even came to look at it, because like no banks were lending any money, and no investors were, you know, parting with anything. So so we had the space, and after a while, like I grew up in the restaurant business, so like even though I didn't want to be in it, whenever I went to a restaurant, I like, you know, saw the things I liked, saw the things I didn't like, and I knew in the back of my head, like if I ever did it, like I kind of want to do like an upscale pizzeria and like have cool beers and craft beers and local breweries. And so I just tried it, and originally I thought, you know, maybe I'll do this and I'll flip it, and then my dad will have like a tenant for a long time.
Right.
But I get to do the stuff I want to do. I get to like be involved in youth wrestling. I get to, you know, be involved in the neighborhood. I get to kind of be an activist. I get to like pursue like recycling stuff and like, you know, the kind of.
You don't have to do billable hours.
No, I don't have. All my friends I went to law school with are miserable, one. And a lot of them wanted to bartend for me because A, they don't get to see people. Two, they don't make the kind of money they wish they did.
Right.
So it's, you know, it's been great.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any vegan pizza at the pizza?
No, but we've been working on a gluten-free pizza for.
No, you have to do vegan. Then I can go there.
Well, we can always deduct stuff. We can always take the cheese and stuff off. So.
That's good.
But gluten-free coming soon.
Really? That's exciting.
Yeah.
You're definitely somebody who probably works very well under stress. So that's probably a good quality to have if you are elected, because you know, you'll be pulled in all different directions.
It's another one of the benefits of being a wrestler.
Absolutely.
You learn how to perform under pressure.
Exactly. Public safety is another big issue. We're seeing an uptick in shootings lately.
Yep.
As a city councilor, what would you do to help quell the violence?
I think, you know, public safety has a lot to do with economic development. I think, you know, what I was talking about before with small businesses, encouraging small businesses to be like eyes on the street, I think that would help. I think we need to make sure that our, you know, police and fire firefighters and first responders have all the resources they need to fight back. I think, the wrestling thing helps too in that, because we need programs for our kids to have, especially like that weird age, like when you're, like 12 to 19, 20.
Right.
And with what we're doing with the wrestling program, it's great because the kids who graduate from wrestling now are coming back to coach, and that's what I'm now old. I'm 31.
Ancient.
But wrestling's one of those sports where it's always good to have some older kid come back and roll around with you and teach you, the things that they learned. So
well, it teaches a lot of things: discipline, teamwork.
Yep.
Even though wrestling is obviously
it's an individual sport, but
right,
you're pursuing team goals together,
right.
and that's the way life is.
Yeah.
Life is a team sport, but you're on your own.
Absolutely. Are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup?
I hope so. I'm a little nervous what's going to happen if they win the cup at Game 6, because I have a place, my restaurant's right down the street. So
right.
Hopefully the police and fire have it under control, and all the fans are just happy they're not crazy.
Exactly. Is Doc Rivers going to go to LA?
I don't know. I have a lot of respect for what he did, but I think we might need the picks. We're going to be bad for a while, so I think we'll take the picks and the young talent.
I don't know. I don't want to lose him, and I don't want to lose. KG obviously is getting old.
Yeah.
But in basketball world.
Yeah.
But
in the regular world too.
Come on now. He's not that old. What is he? 36?
I think he's 36.
Yeah. He's not that old.
I'm learning that. Yeah.
No. And then obviously we have the Red Sox. Who's your favorite Red Sox player?
I'm a Pedroia guy. I really like Pedroia. He's kind of the undersized guy with the big heart, and that's what I was when I was a high school athlete. So.
And let's talk about the Patriots for a minute. Favorite Patriot player?
My favorite Patriot player is Vince Wilfork. I really love him, but growing up it was always Willie McGinnis.
Yes, and of course I'm sort of making light of a sad situation. So we talked a little bit off camera about the poor choices, allegedly, of one of the players on the Patriots team who will perhaps no longer be a Patriot, but that's neither here nor there. I think there's also a lesson that can be learned there. You certainly have a lot of young kids who look up to athletes.
Yeah.
And, you have to sort of teach kids that just because there's somebody playing baseball or football or basketball, they make poor decisions, and you have to kind of sit back and learn from people's mistakes and determine that, you're not going to do the same things.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have people in the community and their peers and neighbors to be involved, because professional athletes, and my lawyer training's coming out, allegedly these things happened and nothing's been accused yet formally, but it's important to have neighbors and people that because you don't know what somebody on TV does and when they get home. So. Right,
that's very, very true. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about the city since you started campaigning? And I know it's been only a month and a half so far, but
yeah, just how diverse it is. Every neighborhood's so different. Not just in the kind of people that live there, but just physically, and the streets of East Boston look nothing like the streets of Jamaica Plain, and it's every neighborhood has a story and a unique part of the history of Boston. And as a poli-sci and history major in college, I really appreciate the different parts of the city that made Boston what it is.
Yeah. Have you been to some of the neighborhoods that I really like? Fort Hill, which is part of Roxbury, right behind RCC, and also Bay Village, which is over by Columbus Ave and Stewart Street. It's people. I've mentioned Bay Village to people before, and they're like, "Where is that?" Yeah. But that's another little hidden gem of the city. Yeah. What's other than your restaurants, your family restaurant and your pizza place? What is your favorite restaurant in the city?
I really like Reno's place in East Boston as kind of an old school Italian place. I really love Gaslight. I think that's a really great place. There's a place also in East Boston called Angelus Cafe that's probably the best Mexican, I think. Not my pizza, I think Pico is really good.
Where's that?
Pico's in the South End. Okay. So is Copa. I'm kind of an Italian-ophile.
Really?
So.
Can't tell.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Sushi, my favorite sushi place is actually in Brookline, Fugakyu. Have you ever been there?
That's the best, probably. But in the city, I like JP Seafood.
I don't think I've ever been there.
That's on Center Street, and JP, sort of right near the fire station.
Okay. I'm going to have to get over there.
Yeah, it's almost when you get to South Street, so it's pretty much at the end. And a great place for ice cream, FOMU on Center Street, and they also have an Alston location. Okay. So if you want some good ice cream. That's
I always do. That's
my tip.
Yeah, that's my secret thing my wife always yells at me about.
That's what she's there for, to yell at you. So if people want to learn more about you, do you have a website that they can go to?
Yeah, my website is my name, philipfrattaroli.com, but that's going to be hard for everybody to spell. So I bought Phil for Boston, so you can find it easily. And my Twitter handle is pfrat with 2 T's. So.
And I'm sure you're looking for, well, I don't want to speak for you, but are you looking for people to volunteer on the
Yeah,
campaign,
I mean,
get
we
involved?
love volunteers. It's always good to go into neighborhoods when you have somebody with you who knows the lay of the land. And like I said, this is my first campaign, so I need all the help I can get.
Absolutely. How's it been in terms of just, are you having a difficult time trying to get to every place that you need to be at? I mean, that must be like the biggest part of it is kind of scheduling.
It really is. And then when you factor in the fact that like it's not easy to get from East Boston to West Roxbury at rush hour when all these events are starting.
Exactly.
So so now that we're going, we're going to hire somebody soon, and maybe somebody can help me like get to these events and maybe plan the schedule a little bit better so I don't have to do the big commute from one end to the other.
Yeah, you must be hearing a lot too from constituents about different things they want to see. What is the one thing that's sticking out in your head as to what somebody has said to you that they are most concerned about?
Well, the schools. I think the schools are the biggest thing, and for people of my generation, my age, it's the cost of living in the city. It's so expensive, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to buy something.
Well, it's sort of like a catch-22 because there's not enough low and even middle-income housing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in order to keep the city going, you sort of have to have the high-end places.
Yeah.
But then we have all these high-end places that are vacant.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are renting, but if they could save up, it would make better sense for them to actually buy.
And then there's weird things going on, like right now with real estate, that like everybody's just going like way over the asking price.
Well, I know.
I don't know how that's going to be affected with what happened in the last couple of days with interest rates.
Right.
Though.
Did they go up again?
They went up like half a point in 2 days.
Yeah, it's like it's a little nuts. We were in the process of looking for something, and we were outbid like on 6 or 7 properties before we finally got one. And when we got the call that we got one, we were like, we did, but just because we were so used to putting in bids and then having them say, oh no, so, and then finding out after that people were going like 20% over the asking price.
It's crazy.
So it's kind of like
we did this. We fell in love with the place before we were like had all our pre-approval stuff done, and it was gone within a day, and then they went like 25,000 over the asking, and we were just like, oh, okay, next time we're not going to fall in love so easily.
Exactly.
But it's I mean it's good. It's good that the city's thriving like this, but it's hard for people, 30-somethings, 20-somethings who want to stay in the city, raise their families here.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here and talking about why you're running, and I want to encourage everybody to go online and check you out a little bit more, learn more about you. If you're at a community forum and if he's at a community forum in your neighborhood, definitely go hear from him and the other candidates. Again, we will be having all the candidates on throughout the next couple of months, including mayoral candidates. We're going to take a quick break and be back with Jack Kelly, who is also an at-large city council candidate. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back. I am Seth McCoy. My guest right now is Jack Kelly, who is an at-large city council candidate. If you have a question for Jack or for me, you can call up 617-708-3290. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Seth.
No problem. So first question, you've been involved with city government. You worked for the mayor at one point. Why are you running for city council at large?
Running for city council at large because my experience, not only in life, but my experience working for the mayor and working in the private sector for Mass General Hospital and being a writer and like socially thinking about issues in a broad sense, I believe that I have the skills to do what I think the city council is supposed to do, which is to be able to implement a broad vision on a very sort of singlistic way with people one-on-one level and being able to do both and essentially dance at the same time. Right,
exactly. And I have to say, as a neighborhood coordinator, I used to be a neighborhood coordinator, so it's almost like being a city councilor because you're dealing with constituent calls, small and large. You're dealing with developers who want to come into the different neighborhoods and create property and development and all that stuff, and open restaurants.
Right, and if I could jump in, I'm glad you brought that up because there are times, and from being a neighborhood coordinator, my own opinions, I couldn't express them because you work for an elected official. In my case, I work for the mayor, and I'm respectful of that chain of authority. And there were situations where I felt, well, maybe this is a better way of doing it, but you can't do it. And now by taking the experience I had by dealing with people in an actual sense, but also dealing with high-end people that are developers and restaurant owners, and being able to try to figure out a way that in the budget that you have available, how can I improve my community, but also do it in a way that's not trampling on actual residents, but at the same time have the vision that the mayor is trying to set out and make sure that it doesn't trample on that. It's a different way to do it. But now as a city councilor, I'm excited to hopefully get on there and serve so that I can take my vision and really push forward with that.
One of the things the city councilors also work on is the budget. So that would be a new opportunity for you to kind of look. I mean, obviously, when you worked for the mayor, you probably had a general idea of how the money is spent and all that stuff. But in terms of
I
actually,
couldn't pick at it though,
exactly,
which I wish I could. But.
Instead of sitting there and kind of going through line by line and talking to department heads about where they're spending their money, how they're spending their money. Are you looking forward to that if you're elected? Or
It's funny you bring that up because that's from a legislative standpoint and the actual standpoint, besides of just being a public official and using the bully pulpit to do different things and advocate for people, and that's sort of separate from the actual job, which is the budget.
Right.
That's really what the concrete thing of what we do.
Right.
And I can't wait to get in there because I think there's a feeling that it's with people that when it comes to city politics or city government that you can't really be high-minded and really these philosophical issues are out of your reach. I disagree. I actually think the zoning code and the budget, you can push forward stuff if you're paying attention and advocating for different things and paying attention to each neighborhood, how it goes precinct by precinct, person by person, and saying, okay, maybe this area we can get rid of because it's not, we don't need it anymore because the neighborhood's doing well, or maybe, but this area I want to add here because there's a real need for it, and then still be applied to something that you philosophically sort of progress to a different, vision for the city in the future. So.
Right, absolutely. And it's also about building coalitions with other councilors, whether they're at large or district councilors. There's going to be a whole new city council essentially. So that's kind of exciting for everybody at home who's gearing up for election day. Hopefully you are gearing up for election day because it's very important.
Yes.
But, it's people have a lot of choice when it comes to who they're going to vote for in September and again in November. So why should people check your...
Why should they vote for me?
Yes.
Because my experience, both personal and in life and working for the mayor, I know that I will be a really good public servant. And I like that word, public servant, because it's necessary of the job. It's a difficult job. It's not as glorious as I think people think it is. And also running for office isn't as glorious as people think it is. And you can just see how much traffic I've been stuck in to understand that. But you have to, and this is where I say to myself, because you can laugh, you can say, well, why am I even doing this? This is crazy. I'm stuck in West Roxbury. I'm trying to get here and I'm trying to get here. And that's why there has to be a legitimate, passionate reason why you're trying to do this, to serve people, because you want to have a greater good for society. And in my case, if I had to sum it up in one sentence, when I was growing up in Charleston, I went to a very good school. It was a private school, and I was playing hockey, and my life was good, and a pill came out, and it destroyed communities, and I want to make sure that I'm preventing something like that from happening, and whether it's drug use or some other catastrophe, a bad development project that can kill a neighborhood for 30 years.
Right, exactly.
And that's why I'm running, to make sure that I'm looking out for people so that bad things don't happen.
Did you always want to run?
It's an interesting question. I can't think of, when I was a kid, I don't remember saying, oh, I want to be, John F. Kennedy one day or anything. I wanted to play for the Bruins, right? So when that didn't happen, I think everything else was just a consolation prize, right? But I think where my element of service came into play, what I wanted to run was when I came out of what I came out of before, and I've been putting this out there. I had a substance abuse history. And it was very, very dark, and it was very bad, and from a personal standpoint, and it was, when I came out of that, and I started getting active in my community, and then I eventually became an iron worker, and then when I worked for the mayor, I seen how important, things like unionism were, and how important, economic diversity and economic things can impact a neighborhood and impact people who need to be sprung up. I started to see how important this stuff was, and it was important that someone like myself had a unique voice coming from a different perspective. And that's when I really got engaged of, okay, I can be an activist, but to really be an activist and to really change things, I need to be sitting at that table with the budget, because that's where the real leverage is.
Right.
Because as working for an elected official, as you know, and being around them, you can put pressure on them, and you can do a lot of different things, and the neighborhood can organize, but being in that seat of having leverage over people saying, I won't vote for your budget unless you do this.
Right.
That's where the power is.
Right. And I also want to point out, while we're talking about the budget, because a lot of people would come, I used to work for Council President Murphy, and people would come after the budget has already been released to ask for things on the budget to the city councilors, which, you know, we were always like, you really need to be lobbying the mayor's office well before the budget is even written and printed. You know, it's helpful for the councilors to hear what the issues are and what you're passionate about, but you really need to be talking to the mayor's office and then talking to the councilors before the budget comes out, not during that process, although it's important to be involved and go to those hearings. So would you try to work to engage the residents so that they would know, like, okay, here's the process, here's where we need to hear from you? Because I just, you know, sometimes there's some grandstanding with different groups.
And in some sense, I would be grandstanding if I just did that and then didn't do anything, because I think, and this, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I was just at the McCormick Association, I think last week or 3 days ago,
or whenever,
recently, and we, you know, they asked about different things you would do to get people engaged. You know, from working in this environment, that you go to these meetings, there's 5 people there, 5, 10 people, and it's the same faces and people who are active, and we know that they hear it, but what about the greater neighborhood as a whole? And usually they get upset when something is already a done deal. So what I would do is make sure that we're using technology to, you know, with these civic associations or neighborhood councils, whatever group that is defined by the city as the group that is going to be the one official policy for the neighborhood through the city, I would make sure that they have money available, if necessary, to set up technology through a computer that can be done right on a Mac or a regular computer, a laptop, that people can actually sit at their house and watch the meeting and ask questions in real time. That technologically, that can be done. And that's where we can use technology to continue to bring the city and the issues to the residents. And maybe someone will say, it's too cold and I'm not going to a meeting, because most people do that, or the Celtics are on the Bruins, or I'm not going.
Exactly.
But now, if maybe they can watch it on their iPad, maybe they do, at least for 20 seconds, because it was something that they were interested in. They have a question answered, and that can happen. So if I become a city councilor, I'm going to completely use technology to be much more available to people, and we can do it. We can do it for relatively cheaply. I mean, think of a program like Skype. You don't even need to set a partnership up with it. You can just do it. And I think a lot of people sort of overthink some of this stuff. This can be done pretty easily if you just want to do it. And those are the things that I'm going to be pushing for, whether it's permitting or parking tickets, arguing them. There's ways you can do it that don't necessarily have to burden people or the residents, especially middle class people, with that. We hold that burden. Every time there's parking issues, every time you have to go to City Hall, it's middle class people like us. We're the ones that have to deal with the frustration of that. We keep the city humming. And so I'm trying to make life easier for people in the city, and we can use technology to do that.
Schools are a big issue too. What do you want to do, or what's your vision for how the Boston public school system should be?
So very convoluted question, and I'm not avoiding it, and I won't avoid it. But
well, and also I should point out that a city councilor really doesn't have that much control over.
I was just going to say that, and I want people to know exactly the job I'm trying to get. The mayor is going to be the one that pushes that. I can fight for what my view and my sort of huge picture view is, and I believe in neighborhood schools. However, this is where it gets convoluted, and it needs a much broader discussion, because there's details with this. I don't believe in attacking teachers. My girlfriend is a teacher, and she's a public school teacher, and I see what she goes through. I'll tell you right now, I would not want to be a teacher, and I say that publicly. I could not handle it. I don't have the patience for it. I want to help kids. I want them to learn, but I couldn't do it. So I'm not going to then come back and say, well, I want to punish them because they should just do it out of the goodness of their heart. They shouldn't be. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it should stop progress either. And that, you know, am I pro-charter, am I not? I'm sort of in the middle. I want to do whatever's going to work, but that doesn't mean that just by fixing schools with a policy that we think is going to be a good wand, and all of a sudden, poof, the school system is going to be great. It's not going to be. Because if we don't fix our neighborhoods, we can't fix our schools. I don't care how good your school system is. If you don't fix some of the social issues that are in those neighborhoods, you're still going to have issues. And that's not coming up in this discussion with school policy. It's just gone, as if we live in neighborhoods that no issues happen. It's disturbing to me the way that that's being reported. Boston's great. We have a great city. But the conception that there's no issues and that there's, you know... It's a broader discussion as to what's happening in the whole city. We were talking earlier with Philip Frattaroli, and there's an uptick in crime right now. So, you know, we have to address the crime problems and why kids
are choosing, to pick up knives or guns or, just be violent. And obviously there are adults who are violent as well, but we need to address those issues and then make the neighborhoods better.
Absolutely. And that's why I decided to talk about my biography and to tell people, put that out there. I'm not doing it for any other reason. I'm trying to highlight that when people go down a wrong way in life, it doesn't just affect them, it affects the whole community.
Right.
And if there isn't safeguards and ways to get them back, your community will not improve. I don't care how good everything is. I don't care how much, there could be the greatest teachers on planet Earth sitting at every Boston school throughout the city, and it won't matter if you have a mother or a dad who is addicted to drugs and their kid is coming from that environment and then going into school. And that, they're interacting with good people, that's fine, but they still have these social, so we're not treating that, we're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
And it has to be a part of the school conversation. And if I have to be the one to really push that, even within the mayoral race, then my candidacy was a success as far as I'm concerned.
How can people find out more about you? Do you have a website?
I do. It's jackkellyforboston.com. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Right.
I want to thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Yes.
Are the Bruins going to take the Stanley Cup?
Yes, in 6.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. You heard it here first.
Right.
So we're going to be right back with Chris Conroy. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Joining me now is Chris Conroy, another candidate for at-large city council. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much, Seth. Pleasure to be here.
So why are you running?
I'm running because we're at a point right now in our city where we first time in 30 years, we have a non-incumbent mayoral race, and we also have a superintendent that is leaving our school system.
Yeah.
For me, it's a really pivotal time in our city's history to think about what's the quality of educational leadership that we have, not only in our school system, but in our government and in our policymaking system. So for me, I'm really interested in thinking about how do we connect resources to our schools and bring some of our world-class institutions into our neighborhoods and into our school system to do so.
Right. So sort of like bringing together all the different institutions so that kids can have a better understanding of the world at large. Is that what I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't know if you heard Jack Kelly was just on and we were talking a little bit about how there needs to be a little more just in the school system as opposed to just, okay, here's where you go to school, here's where you learn, math and science and English. It's got to be a little broader. So is that what you're thinking?
Well, I think one of the key questions that Boston's going to have to answer over the next 25 years is how are we going to connect our greatest resources, both public and private, to help solve our largest problems. So how are we going to connect those institutions to our citizens? Right now, we are, for the foreseeable future, going to enter into an age where we're going to have tight city budgets, right? State and federal funding are decreasing. We're also seeing a lot of middle class over the last 10 years. We've seen a lot of middle class families leaving the centers of the city and moving outwards. And so that's going to put a pinch on our revenues in terms of our tax base. Now, there's really 3 ways to think about how to solve that problem. The first 2 that we know of have to do with money. Generally, we think about government as an institution that taxes and spends, right? And most of our arguments and our conversations tend to center around those 2 aspects. But the third thing that government can do, and it's probably the most powerful tool that we're going to see in the 21st century, is convene, and we can connect our citizens. For us, what makes Boston great is the ideas that come out of our institutions, right? We have a top medical or world-class medical institution. Same thing for our colleges and universities. Same thing for our financial institutions. And we have emerging fields in biotech, and we also have a telecommunications industry that's strong as well too.
Absolutely.
The challenge is how do we take those existing resources and then reconnect them to our citizens all across the city? And I think for me, that's what I've been working on for the last 10 years as an educator, but also as a community activist. And that's what I'll do as the next city councilor.
Now, your parents were teachers too.
That's correct.
Are they still teaching?
Yep, they're both still teaching. My father's over at BC High in Dorchester. He taught there for over 30 years.
Wow.
And my mother originally started off at Hyde Park High School. Her first years with teaching were actually during the busing era in Hyde Park. And so she had an incredible amount of experience in a very short period of time. At a very pivotal point in Boston's history as well too. And I think her stories about that experience are the ones that inspired me to get involved in teaching, get involved in education, because I see it as a central place where we can solve large problems. For not just as an educational institution, but societal. It's the center of our community.
Did you always want to run for office, or was this really?
So, I mean, being politically involved, so teaching is a political act, right? I think in any sense, right? So when you're in the classroom, a large part of what you're bringing to bear on the problems of the day within the school or the challenges that students face are wrapped up in the politics of that community, right? And so when you teach, you really need to think about, okay, what's the context here? What are the students experiencing in their lives? How can you connect that to the curriculum? And I think that's what politics is, right? Being able to serve your community by understanding who you have in front of you and being able to listen and then being able to turn that something into something special by working with folks.
Now, if you're elected, will it be hard for you to walk away from teaching?
It'll be hard to walk away from my involvement with young people, I think, but I don't intend to walk away from that work. So I think for me, a central piece of what I hope to do and what I will do as a city councilor is to make sure that young people are involved in leadership, in shaping policy, in getting connected to City Hall. And I really want to bring a new feel and a fresh perspective on what it means to be civically engaged in this election period, right? So,
well, and you hit on something that I talk about a lot on the show, and that is the civic engagement piece of it. And that, you know, we're a city of hundreds of thousands, but we don't all go out and vote. The eligible people don't go out and vote. So that's part of the trick too, is making sure that you as a candidate are getting people, some who might not always vote. They might vote in a federal election, but on a municipal election, sometimes they'll vote, but sometimes they won't. We'll probably see an uptick this year because it's a chance for a new mayor. But how would you, if you're elected, try to keep driving those numbers up?
Right. So I think, again, I'll take this back to education and how institutions connect. I think people will get out and vote and people will get active, and voting is just one way you can get active in your community. It's an essential way to get active in your community, but there's also a sense of belief that your voice is going to matter at the end of the day that leads you to go out and vote. And so for me, developing that sense of civic engagement really starts in our schools and in our community meetings, in our community centers, whether it's a neighborhood council or a neighborhood association, making sure there's a diverse set of citizens that are within those institutions. And so for me, what I'd like to see more of is more citizens connecting in different ways. So when I was a teacher, when I started working in education, I was working at a middle school in South Boston. I was as part of a nonprofit called Citizen Schools, and they really reimagined the way that local citizens could get involved in our public schools and our public institutions. So I had the privilege of being able to work with a student of mine like Jordan, who struggled in the classroom early on in 6th grade and really was having difficulty finding himself academically. But he was able to connect after school with an extended learning day to a young professional who worked as a computer software engineer. And that individual came in and taught Jordan how to create a video game.
Oh, wow.
So he's using the skills that he was learning during the school day, but he was using it in a different context, in an engaging way for him, and he was able to see himself over the course of 10 weeks, 12 weeks, a few months, to see himself grow in a way that was intellectually stimulating, but also allowed him to create something new and to see his talent in a different way. I think those kinds of interactions with citizens outside your normal daily kind of routine of go to school, see mom, or, go back home, see mom and dad, or, those are the kinds of experiences that lead people to want to get further connected to their outside community.
Right. There are a lot of issues that are happening in the city right now, but as a city councilor, one of probably the most important role that you'll have, aside from doing the budget, is constituent services.
Yes.
So have you thought a little bit about, some of the issues you're hearing from people that, might not be this big picture stuff, but it's more of the small, things, quality of life issues that need addressing?
Well, it's different in different parts of the city, so you need to be able to understand the neighborhoods from a broad perspective, right? But two of the things I hear most about are public safety and also zoning, right? So you're thinking about how is community development happening? And so if you go to Back Bay right now, there's lots of conversation about how high the building should be in those neighborhoods. If you go into different parts of the city, people are talking about, how are we engaging young people that are going down a difficult path or struggling and are getting involved in a cycle of violence. So for me, those are the two issues that I would want to talk about in terms of constituent services, and those are the two places I would work really hard to connect.
And how about the budget? Are you, as you know, and we've talked about, that's really like a big thing for the city council, that the opportunity to look through the mayor's budget and go line by line and see where the money is being spent. Are there things now that you can look at and say, I don't know if you've seen the budget, but if you can just look back and say, okay, well, this might be something that we could cut back on, or How do you think you would approach that process?
Well, so I think, so I'll take the school department budget for example. So I think there's a couple ways that you can view this question, right? You can view it from the standpoint of there's limitations, and we have to work within those limitations, or you can view it from the standpoint of there's abundance out there in terms of the resources that we're not usually utilizing to bring into the picture. So when we talk about college and career readiness, for example, one of the things that the school department is investing in is Madison Park, right? Vocational school. It's a big project that we want to pull off to get students not just college ready, but career ready, because we know 70% of our students at any one time are going to be going to school and they're going to be working.
Exactly.
My previous experience before I came on and announced my run was with Year Up, which is a nonprofit organization and an educational institution that works with 18 to 24-year-olds that are trying to bridge that gap between a high school diploma or a GED and a professional workplace environment. One of the things that we really need to think about is how we connect education and jobs differently, and we don't have to do that by spending more money. What we need to do is figure out ways to bring our employers to the table and bring them into our schools. I've had an experience with another student of mine, Kobe. I met him early on in my teaching career as an 8th grader, young, bright kid, engaging, a leader among his peers. As I got to see him progress over time in high school and around the neighborhood, what I started to notice about him was that he was still kind of searching for who he was going to be post-high school. And even during that high school phase, it was hard for him to figure out what's the direction I'm going to take. I had the opportunity in January to see him cross the stage, getting a diploma from Year Up with 18 college credits under his belt. In addition to that, he also had business management experience, had an internship experience at one of the country's largest private banks in State Street, and now he's working as a fund accountant, earning over $30,000 some odd dollars a year in an entry-level position with the ability to work his way up.
That's great.
So you take that, if you take a young man from Dorchester that's trying to figure out his way, and you connect them in a different way. You give them another path other than that 4-year residential college education and view. You can start to change the way that we think about our budget and deal with our budget. It's not all dollars and cents. What it's really about is common sense and how we bring those institutions together.
If people want to learn more about you, do you have a website that you can tell them?
ConroyForBoston.com, CONROY for Boston. And you can also follow me on Twitter, same name, Conroy for Boston, Facebook as well too.
Perfect. And just a reminder to everybody, there's also an All About Boston Facebook page, and I have a Twitter account, Seth A. McCoy. And of course, we put up these shows on YouTube, which we link to the Facebook page and to Twitter. I want to thank you for coming in tonight. It's been great. Before you leave, though, I've been asking the other two candidates before you, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I don't really expect any of you.
Yet?
No, of
okay,
course
good.
not.
I was going to say.
It's sort of like a silly question, but whatever. It's hockey time.
Guaranteed win.
Guaranteed. And
Guaranteed
how many games?
They're going to take it in the next 2.
Okay.
They're going to win in Game 6 at home.
Okay, that's the second one for Game 6.
There
So we'll see. All right, thank you again.
No problem.
Thank you, everybody at home for tuning in, everybody behind the scenes for putting together a great show. We'll see you next time.